Part 2, Lists. So as an addendum to the Ossiarch Bonereapers faction focus, here are some prospective lists that should work to bring further clarity to the synergies, units, and abilities in OBR. These are samples, and aren't finely tuned tournament-winning vehicles, but rather, I think, good starting points to build off of, take ideas from, and generally get the gears turning. The first list is Mortis Praetorians, featuring Catacross himself, because his ego required that he get top billing. The subfaction's -1 army-wide bravery aura is of course completely horrible, but the command ability to reroll all hits when you have been charged is definitely something we can build around in an army this durable. The normal way an army uses effects like this, such as in Nautilus Deepkin, is putting your good unit right up behind a chaff screen so you get the rerolls on the good attacks by sacrificing the chaff to the charge. But in OBR we can just tank the hit and punch back. This army will have lots of relentless discipline points, even with only 2 heroes, which is important. 1 to start, 1 per hero, so 3, 1 per liege, so 5, 3 extra for Catacross, so 8, plus 7 units to roll for, looking for 6s. Safe guess is 9 RDP per round, not bad. Our mobile command center Catacross gives us quite the buff wagon. 3 units within 24 will get healed 3 or regen 3. Once per turn when an opponent gains a command point on a 4-up it's lost instead, and we can pick 1 unit on the table in our hero phase to be up -1 to hit. His Endless Duty command ability gives +1 attacks in shooting or melee to 1 unit within 12, and the other gives +1 to hit for each unit wholly within 36. If you're in Mortis Praetorians, which we are, you also get +1 armor for each unit within 36 as well. So Catacross and Xantos are on 2s, and your guard and other units are on 3s. Speaking of Archcavalos Xantos, this is the subfaction where he can really shine. I mean, normally he's pretty good, I'd play him in whatever. With 12-inch move, 3 damage lance on the charge, Hatred of the Living to reroll 1s to wound against Order and Destruction, and reroll all wounds against Chaos, impact hits on the charge, and he also has Endless Duty, to better spread out the coveted +1 attacks buff. In Mortis Praetorians, however, he can give Hatred of the Living to friendly units as a command ability. We have a big block of 40 Mortec Guard as our main push-up-the-middle force, enjoying a nice 80-point Massive Regiment discount on the last 10. A smaller unit of 20 that should guard a hero, and 5 Death Riders to act as either Xantos Vanguard or mobile objective takers and campers. The guard will probably end up on 2s and 4s Rend 1 with exploding hits, and potentially a Xantos-inspired reroll 1s to help those awful wound rolls if he's nearby, which you kind of don't want since it's wasting his speed, but it could happen. For Mortec Guard, 40 is boss, but expensive. 30 is just fine, but close enough to 40 in cost that it can feel bad to take it. And 20 guard is good, but fully capable of dying without support. And only 10 is a fine camper off on some objective, but they're probably gonna die. Catacross is a military genius, so rounding out the list we have a strategy to oblige the opponent to come to us even if they don't really want to, in 2 Mortec Crawlers. Tossing 6 flaming skulls at people on 2s and 3s, 5 damage but no rend. Inconsistent, but potentially quite harmful. Sort of depends on enemy armor. Your 2 per game Cauldron of Torments roll a die per model in the unit, and each roll equal to or greater than their base bravery slays a model. This is often just nothing since a lot of armies have bravery 7 up, but it can be brutal against bravery 6 multi-wound models, and your 2 per game Cursed Steels can try to snipe a 5 or 6 wound buff hero or 2. I'm generally not even trying to bubble wrap the catapults, unless there's some board edge ambush stuff going on, since an opponent running important units over to attack them has already kind of fallen into the trap. Catacross just wants the enemy forces split up and out of position so the Mortec Guard can grind units down near objectives. If the catapults die, well, some sacrifices are necessary in war. Not to be outdone, the next list is Nagash. For those prospective players who saw the art and saw the model, and read up on some lore and want to be told it's viable, it is. Nagash can be fielded in Legion of Grief and Legion of Nagash, but in those factions he's overcosted, awkward, and diminished from multiple revisions. Generally not great. In OBR, he's in his prime. This list is set up so Nagash is a self-sufficient bully, able to go off on his own and generally do whatever he wants, while solid cells of Mortec Guard go about capturing objectives and scoring points. In Petrifex, he's on 2 upper rolling 1's armor, 4 up ward against mortals, 9-inch flying with 16 wounds, casts and unbinds 8 spells a turn at +3, a proper bonus to cast for a real god, picks 5 units in your hero phase to heal or regen 3 anywhere on the table, and Supreme Lord of the Undead gives army-wide reroll 1s to hit and saves. His attacks are nothing particularly special for even a 400-point monster, but they're good enough to get lucky every other fight. Obviously the spells are the real show here. First, he can cast Arcane Bolt as many times as he likes per turn, and due to his +3, any 7s or higher will do D3 mortal wounds, which I've found he'll generally machine gun 3 to 5 of them out after you've used all your utility spells, and just need to finish something off or free himself or another unit from combat so they can move next phase instead of having to retreat. For those that remember Anvil Guard in my Cities of Sigmar show, he's got Umbral Spell Portal for Hand of Dust, making for a just under 22-inch range save or die against target model. This means that big troublesome monsters and heroes have around a 40% chance of getting slain outright before you factor in unbinding attempts. Not the most reliable ever, but something your opponent is going to have to respect. He also has Soul Stealer, which drains life from a low bravery unit within 24 to heal him. He's also most capable of fully utilizing your spell lores, as he knows them all. Arcane Command gives you D3 RDP on a 5-up, Empowered Netherite Weapons is of course your staple combat buff for improving the chance of exploding hits to a 5-up, Reinforced Battle Shields aka Shield Tilt is your staple defensive spell, giving your battle line a 5-up ward against mortal wounds. Drain Vitality is probably the odd man out and rarely useful, except to soften enemy hammers with big procs on their 6s to hit, and you finally have someone to cast Mortal Contract every turn, which is a fun one, but OBR usually doesn't have enough wizards to take it, after the first 2 auto-includes. Pick an enemy unit within 18, and for the rest of the game, whenever a phase ends and their attacks cause damage to an OBR unit, on a 3-up they take D3 mortal wounds. After the FAQ you can only put it on any given unit once per game, but cast it early and often and the damage over time adds up on more and more units. Finally, you have a spell Nagash made for himself, and he is also probably the only caster that gets to make full use of it in the army. Protection of Nagash gives the caster a 5-up shrug against wounds and mortal wounds, and if any damage gets through, they get to teleport anywhere outside of 9 from enemy models. Normally you put this on some okay 5-wound OBR caster, and if the opponent tries to kill him, you get your teleport if he lives, but it's a gamble. But on Nagash, you can proactively trigger it by simply charging something, since you'll almost certainly live through the experience and enemy models in combat can't choose not to attack. In the interest of fun, I gave him Purple Son of Shyish, which is a sphere of annihilation that slays models outright, in units it touches on a 6-up per model. If models in the unit have a wounds characteristic of 6 or more, 6s do d6 mortal wounds instead. He's not able to just engage anything, as stuff like Ghoul King on Royal Terrorgeist, Lucky Frost Lords, Archaon, and some S-tier damage hammers can definitely take him out, even with his incredible armor and mortal wound shield. But we've given him the tools to pick his battles and use proper target priority with Hand of Dust for single target and Purple Sun for hordes, on top of his normal magical might. Shutting down opponent magic with 8 unbinds at +3 each is also an arrow in his quiver, though preposterous casters like Hollowheart Covens and Tzeentch Fate Dice Fixers will regularly resolve spells without much trouble. One last note, our Liege Cavalos has Godbone Armor, which is the Petrifex required artifact, and it negates the first wound suffered each phase, but note it's only for wounds, not mortal wounds, which means it's kind of bad, but what are you going to do? This list is very low RDP, with only 4 plus maybe 1 per battle round, so Arcane Command from Nagash is probably going to be a regular spell in your rotation. Most OBR strategies are patient, but you have to start them immediately. You think ahead where you need to be, and begin running their turn 1, since you don't have the luxury that many AOS armies have, in a bunch of solid high movement units that allow you to postpone positional decisions until forced to make them later. So if you want a more aggressive list, here's an Archon version that trades a lot of the comfortable defense and regen for some offensive options. We use a Cavalos Lance Battalion, which lowers our drops a bit, lets one of our impact hits per turn be free, and allows retreat and charge to turn impact hits back on in protracted combats, or to hop from one combat to another. It's mostly here for the +1 RDP from having a battalion, +1 Phantom for the free impact hit, and an additional artifact choice, since the first one has to be Godbone Armor from Petrifex, and that artifact sucks. The Liege Cavalos gets +2 wounds from required Petrifex trait, and I gave him Helm of the Ordained, which is a +1 to hit aura for everyone and their mounts within 12. This helm, coupled with Endless Duty command ability, make him a force multiplying god, with +1 attacks and +1 to hit buffs to hand out, neither of which require any rolling. Cavalos bestows these amazing buffs onto his vanguard unit of 6 Necropolis Stalkers, all with, after buffs, 4 attacks per model on 3s and 3s, Rend 3, damage 3. They are elite and fragile for OBR, but if you get the charge, they will do preposterous damage. They can reroll charges and have move 6, which is very slow for a normal army, but quote-unquote fast for OBR. So we have our Death Star damage men, 2 units of Speedy Death Riders, a big block of 40 guard with Nadirite swords and shields, Oh, you might be wondering why no spears for the extra reach, but you really just want the rend from swords, especially since how many guys can pile in is very unreliable in OBR. Since you'll often be the one getting charged, which is usually against a corner or an area with the fewest guys able to attack as your opponent can manage, they're still on 25mm bases luckily, so 2 ranks will always get to fight. You might also be wondering why no Soul Cleaver Great Blades, since 1 in 10 models can upgrade to this weapon, and I say upgrade with air quotes, because it's counterintuitively not an upgrade, since only Nadirite weapons have exploding hits, and your buff spell that lets them proc on 5s only widens this gap. The normal swords are just kind of better. A Soul Reaper will have to be the buff hero for the 40 guard, since we don't have the points for the superior Soul Mason or regenerative Bone Shaper. Archon will be the mover and shaker of this list, being a strong triple caster at +2 with full access to the Mortician's lore. A very fast 16-inch flying move, and regens 4 units at 24 inches. He's historically been way too fragile at 11 wounds and a 4-up save with only a 6-up shrug, but in Petrifex he's on 3-up armor, which is a big help. His Curse of Years War Scroll spell is a complicated, good-sounding spell that actually sucks, so don't worry about it, the lore spells are better. All in all, a flashier OBR list than the normal Death and Taxes variety, and still has about 7 RDP per battle round. The last list is where we get weird and show some extra synergies and interactions. The heroes are much lower to the ground, allowing us to fit in more fun stuff with the extra points. 1 of each spellcaster hero on foot in a Mortician Trident battalion, which lets them cast an additional spell each when near the Gothazar Harvester. Only the Soul Mason of the 3 has a useful War Scroll spell that he can cast multiple times a turn on a 2-up, that lets a unit reroll 1s to hit. I suppose Bone Shapers is alright, as an 18-inch mortal wound on a 6-up Hordebreaker is like kind of okay. His main thing is being able to regen a nearby unit 3 and still cast a buff spell like empowered Nadirite weapons. Artisan's Key lets him regen twice on a 4-up. Nice. Lumen Scythe gives the Soul Reaper +1 to cast lore spells, which is very helpful. Notice how we don't have the Staliarch Lord's awful artifact. Aren't you required to take it? Well, in this specific subfaction, it says that the first liege has to take it, and if you don't have a liege, well, no harm, no foul. We're taking Staliarch Lords for that passive run and charge, to, on average, just about double the speed of our entire army. Gothazar Harvesters are sweet, though fragile at 10 wounds and a 4-up save. They have a bunch of big boy 2 damage attacks that do 2 mortal wounds on 6s to hit, but more importantly, each time a 1 wound model within 3 of them dies, on a 4-up it comes back to life right then and there. Before you ask, no, you don't regen 2 guys from 1 dying if 2 harvesters are near it, they fixed that, but it's still really good. 20-man units of Mortec Guard kinda need a harvester to accompany them, and 40s get the wizards, though you can decide in deployment who pairs up where. Since we have 3 wizards that can cast multiple spells if near the harvester, we got some endless spells. Bone-Tithe Shrieker, which soul links to the wizard who casts it, meaning they suffer -1 to cast as a downside, but the opponent can't move it. Put it near an enemy unit, and all your guys are at +1 to hit that unit. Since OBR lists are almost devoid of mortal wounds, we have Pendulum for a quick and easy D6, and Geminids for some D3s and 2 debuffs that you can't stack with each other. -1 to hit for one, and -1 attacks for the other. This list is a tad low on RDP, with 5 + 1 or 2 per battle round, so Soul Mason has Arcane Command to farm them during play. Ossiarch Bonereapers armies, at least from a starting point, tend to be surprisingly tricky to make. As I mentioned before, and unlike many other armies, you simply can't fit even close to everything you want in 2,000 points. Alright, let's make a list, just the basics. Catacross, a Horse Lord, 3 battle line of 10 cavalry, 40 guard, 20 guard, Harvester to protect the 20 guard, and oh, we're at 1960 already. And I have 0 wizards, no endless spells, and I wanted 2 catapults, but they're 200 each. It's more of a series of concessions than normal, and you'll find yourself often at about 1900 points when your cheapest units are 120 and 130. Still, if you boil things down to rolls and strats, Liege Cavalos and Mortec Crawlers are probably as close as you get to auto-includes. You need those excellent buffs and a decent movement hero, and you need to give your opponent a reason not to just run away from you until they win on points. You've got bones to collect, after all.